Yeah, hi guys. Thank you very much for having me. And I guess the first thing I'd like to do is big up the organisers of this event. This is the third time I've been here. I had an accident shortly over 3 years ago, and this is a unique event in the world that brings together scientists who are working on the future therapies, the current therapies, and together with us, the community. And I think it's a great opportunity for us all to come together and to learn and to speak with the scientists and all of that kind of stuff. I also want to echo what Dr. McDonald said about the Sam Schmidt and his team, who suffered a death in an IndyCar race there of Dan Reed, and I think that was a terrible tragedy to happen to those guys this weekend. And it's something I think we can all agree on there. So just to give you a bit of background on me coming to this event, I came here 3 years ago to the first one, and I heard a story that I think it might almost be a bit of a myth, but I was told that there was a father who had a child who had a spinal cord injury, and he was speaking with a number of, I think it was actually his doctors, the doctors that was attending his daughter, and he said to some of them, he basically said, it was kind of, I suppose, an intimidating thing to say. If I could help my daughter in any way whatsoever to regain function here, I would cut off my own leg. And he said it to, apparently he then said it to all of the other doctors in the room and said, do any of you here today, are you not willing to do that? Are you that committed? And a number of these people did actually say, I'm not able to commit at that level, so I'm going to have to walk out of here. Now, I don't know if that's actually true, but that's a story that I was told when I came to their first one of these, and I think it's probably an attitude that an awful lot of people who have spinal cord injury or whose families have been touched by spinal cord injuries do share. And I know that the majority of people in this room also share that kind of general attitude, and I think that that's one of the reasons that I continue to come to this event, because I know that there's a lot of commitment in this room here. So some good news that some positives that I've taken from my 3 years of being in this world of spinal cord injury is that we've gone from the possibility of one trial with a cellular therapy, which was actually the Geron trial, to now there being competing trials with a number of different companies moving forward, actually having put cells into people, and we're moving forward. I think that's incredibly positive, and in just 3 years from this to happen. And also, not just do we have single interventions that we're looking at combination therapies that people are talking about now. There's going to be a lot of difficulties with getting combination therapies clinically trialed, and we'll talk a little bit later on about just how difficult it is to make these clinical trials happen. But from my perspective, I am more hopeful now and more positive about seeing significant improvement and functional recovery for people with spinal cord injury in my lifetime than I was 3 years ago, and I think that's quite a pretty cool thing to be able to say. And another positive thing is I think that companies and investors who work in this area are recognizing the fact that it is almost one of the low-hanging fruits with central nervous system regeneration. It's a very discrete injury. It's quite easy to administer therapies to it locally, so you can see positive outcome measures quite well, as opposed to some of the other CNS things like Parkinson's, I suppose, MS. So there's money coming from investors into this area as well, and that's incredibly positive for anyone here who is actually, like me, looking for something that will help us down the road. So I also just want to speak a little bit about some of the negatives that I've seen. I've been really quite shocked to learn that there have been therapies that were out there, or that there is science in the papers that may have helped some of us here in this room. And I think you might have heard me speaking about hypothermia yesterday. I was, really upset to learn that that is something that we still can't even prove that it doesn't work. If the Miami Project can come and tell me, that that doesn't work, I'd be happy with it. I could take that. But they can't, and it's taken, not just the Miami Project, but the entire field, 30 or maybe 36 years to actually get a fully fledged, proper clinical trial going in that field. Now, I could be wrong, I could be mistaken in that, but that's on my research, that's what I've been quite upset to learn about that. And I think that a lot of that is actually down to us as patients. We need to keep pushing the scientists and the researchers, the organizations that work in this area to move forward these things that show promise. Also, the difficulties with actually bringing a product to market. I mean, Tony spoke about it a little bit earlier, just the kinds of dollars that are involved with bringing a product fully to market is really daunting. Now, he spoke about a $400 to $500 million number to get to a phase 3 trial, which I think is, it is, ballpark to get a fully fledged stage 3 clinical trial done in North America and delivered to patients. And a lot of investors have to put a lot of money into that. It was pretty scary to hear that those are the kinds of numbers we're talking about. Also, just the timing to get these things to market. I think Jeron yesterday said that even if everything goes perfectly with the current HESC stuff they're working on, it'll take 7 years before it can get to a saleable product. So we just need to bear these things in mind when we're looking at different products and different sciences that are out there now. These things, it's a long road, and these things need to be factored in. Also, another thing is actually the really lack of true cohesiveness in the community has been quite shocking to me. I think we need to come together at more of these events and speak more online and mainly at events like this. So I think I'll turn it over to Harvey now so he can talk for a while.
Hello everyone, this is kind of my first event. I found it very eye-opening. It's been great to see the faces behind the names, and I mean, yesterday was very, very interesting. I know I hardly slept last night, so my mind is whirring, and
can't hear.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. Sorry, I was saying I didn't sleep very much last night. My mind was whirring, and wondering about what kind of topics we would actually discuss here on the advocacy panel. And there are so many, I thought I'll wing it today and see how we get on. Just an extension to what Martin said. One of the biggest things, as my background is in kind of business and finance, is the kind of translation of science, the cost behind it, the regulatory difficulties. Those are, as Martin said, very daunting, and I'm very interested to see whether there are creative solutions out there to reduce the latency and the costs in those areas. I know we had some offline discussions with a few of the researchers on potentially offshoring phase 1s and 2s, and whether those kind of trends could potentially move the field forward at a pace that's more acceptable for the community. And I think we need to explore those. I think the excuse that the FDA is the FDA and that's the way they work is not really a good answer for myself, and I'm not sure if it is for you guys either. So that's been one of the most interesting parts from my perspective, and I think we can take some kind of creative solutions to those problems. I think we'll let Dennis talk. I'm sure he has something prepared. So, Dennis, over to you.
I don't got nothing prepared. I'm joking, I do. first time I've tried to address a group of people by Skype, so I don't know if I can do a good job doing it over Skype. But can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that's nice, actually. No, today a little bit I wanted to talk about, you know, our responsibility towards a cure. And, you know, I think there's a lot of people who sit around and think, well, you know, we haven't been cured, and whose responsibility is that, and whose responsibility is it that we haven't been cured. And a little bit today I want to talk about what we have to do, what our responsibility is. And I think, first of all, our responsibility is to find out. I think our responsibility comes in the point of what we can do to support a cure. And that means supporting those the scientists who are coming together towards a cure, organizations that are coming towards a cure, but also to question organizations that purport to bring a cure about. You know, and I think a little bit, I talked to Martin a little bit about when we started this was, you know, organizations that talk about cure all the time, and one of our responsibilities is to come together and to ask them very difficult questions. And that is, what are you doing? You raise money, and you've raised money, so how do you use that money towards a cure? And our responsibility is to support people, but our responsibility is also is to ask very difficult questions. So we started a campaign towards the Rick Hansen Foundation, asking them, hoping that they would tell us all the things they're doing to bring us a cure. And we asked, and hundreds of people throughout the whole world asked, what do you do to bring us this cure? And there was no answer to that question. You know, and this wasn't a situation of trying to castigate or to try to, you know, bring shame to any organization. When I first started, when I was first paralyzed, I thought, you know, I'm Canadian, and I thought, well, Rick Hansen, that's the guy to support, 100%. And I wish when we had asked the question about what's being spent on cure and what are they doing towards a cure, that we would have gotten a positive answer. Was my hope. You know, my hope was never to get an answer that said, oh, we're not doing enough, or we don't want to answer. But in the end, I think part of our responsibility is to ask any organization that talks about a cure, anybody that uses the cure moniker, that part of our responsibility is to ask them, what are you doing? And if they're doing something to support a cure, then our responsibility is to support that cure and support their efforts. And if they're not doing that, we don't want money siphoned off to organizations that are using the word cure. So I think it comes down in the end as to what our responsibility is in all of this. And there's no one that's going to cure paralysis. The responsibility comes down to those who live with paralysis. And we all have to spend that little bit of time to do that. So anyway, I talked too much, and I don't know if anybody can see me, because I can't see them, and I don't know if anybody's reacting.
Alright, yeah, so give Dennis a big cheer, everyone, make him feel happy. Thanks a lot, Dennis. So, you know, one of the great things I think about having Dennis involved here was because, you know, he mounted a very, you know, eloquent campaign really online, just asking an organization, you know, how are you actually spending money to help us? Like, you're essentially raising money in the name of a cure, and how are you spending that? And we haven't really gotten a good answer, I'm afraid, yet. But that's not to say we won't. So if anyone is listening, we'd love to know. Just to go over, you know, to give people some of the quick background on some of the more major organizations that there are out there that do fund spinal cord research. and the kind of numbers we're talking about, the Rick Hansen organization that Dennis is speaking about, they probably raise about 25 million a year from federal funding and from private donors. Now, we think that maybe they're probably spending 2-3 million of that on restorative therapies, or prospective future restorative therapies. You've got the Christopher Reeve Foundation, which is a very, very well-known organisation, and probably really the best brand out there. They raise about 15 million a year, spend about half of that, 7.5 million, on funding regenerative or therapies that will provide functional recovery. The rest of that is on running their paralysis resource centre. Now compare that to something like the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which works purely on funding research into Parkinson's disease. The Michael J. Fox Foundation raised probably about 40 million last year, and almost all of that went to spinal cord, Parkinson's research. And I definitely see no reason why the Christopher Reeve Foundation can't be, hitting those kinds of numbers. They have an incredibly powerful message and a powerful brand. And, I think that we can help them by getting behind them to work more towards therapies that will provide functional recovery. A few international organisations are the International Spinal Research Trust, also known as Spinal Research out of the UK. They fund probably about 3 million per year on research, and all of the money that they raise goes to therapies that will eventually provide, or hopefully provide, recovery. And then Wings for Life is another organisation based out of Austria that does basically the same kind of numbers. So I'd like to just ask, I want this to really be kind of a town hall or quite an interactive session. And we've just been rabbiting on up here, and I'd love to hear some questions from you guys, or some directions that some of you guys would like this discussion to go in. So I'd like to open things up now for some questions, and then we can go back on some more planned stuff a bit later on. But any questions?
So from where I sit, I see a lot of things wrong. Martin, you remember 2 years ago we were at the Wings for Life scientific meeting, and I got mad because after 2 days of presentation I didn't see anything about chronic spinal cord cure. And after 2 years, nothing changed. I said that already yesterday. And so we, the community, should wake up, look around at what's going on, try to understand what's wrong. Because yes, it's true that we see a lot of progress. We have seen a lot of progress in the last few years. And I think probably it's 30% of what we could have seen. I mean, things could be done much faster. We could be much closer to a cure. And just to make sure there's no misunderstanding about the definition of cure, for me, a cure is to walk out of a wheelchair. So that should be our final destination. Then we, of course, can't do it right away. Intermediate steps, but you can't be happy just with ball and blood. Sure, if we can do it tomorrow, ball and blood, everyone of us will go for it. But it doesn't mean that the research that is going to be done next year will be just on that. We should keep looking at walking out of chairs, and in the meantime, we will be happy if we can reach blood. So, well, we need to do something here. Otherwise, we're going to die in this chair. If we don't change the way research is being done, gosh, we just understand that chondroitin will take a few years at best. Just start clinical trials. What the hell? I'm gonna be too old to ask out a girl by the time Android thinks we do something. And I wanna walk on the beach at sunset with a few girls, so.
She will say no anyway, Paolo. Don't worry for that.
So, okay, from where I sit, we need to take the bull by the horn if we really want to walk. Otherwise, we can just sit down and watch TV.
I've got 2 points on extensions to what Paolo said there. One of them is kind of the balance of scientific rigor versus the urgency from the community, and how that's a kind of fine balancing act. Scientific rigor, I think everyone in the community will agree, is needed, but there are, unfortunately, scientific rigor is also augmented, if augmented is the right word, with politics and bureaucracy. And from that perspective, I don't think the community should be very happy about that, and we should work towards getting rid of that. The other one is the responsibility for the translation of science. We see a lot of good work being done in the labs, basic science, but what we don't see is an appetite to translate that into a product to deliver to the community. And there's no real ownership unless a biotech like Accorda, like In Vivo Therapeutics, comes along and takes that very daunting step, the valley of death, I hear it called many a time. And what we'd like to see our SCI organisations to actually now start to take more responsibility in helping that translation phase, because we can't always rely on biotechs to come along and take on that challenge.
Yeah, I think that the model of relying on major companies to move promising technologies from the lab to or from the bench to the bedside, as it's known, appears problematic, because when Accorda needs 500 million to prove that a therapy actually works in people, and I think a lot of this is down to the FDA as well. I mean, do we really need to spend 500 million to prove that a therapy works? It just seems ridiculous to me. I mean, and the FDA exists to allow people essentially to sell it safely. And I think that we need to get the FDA involved in these discussions more as well. I think there's someone from the FDA speaking this afternoon, so I'm very interested to speak with them.
Sorry, I don't know who asked the question. I think I know the person who's speaking, but I'm not sure. But I think they hit on that fact, is that what we're going to do is our own responsibility towards this. That there's not, for people who are paralyzed to sit around and wait for a cure to happen is not something that's possible. What are we going to do as a community? And I think we need to challenge people that if you're paralyzed and you have a part-time job, then your full-time job's got to be to get the cure moving along. And if you have a full-time job, then your part-time job's got to be that. We can't just sit back and wait for people to cure us. That we're going to have to take some responsibility in this kind of matter. And I think the question that was asked to the person who actually raised the point was, what are we going to do as a community, as a whole group of people, to actually bring these things forward?
We are speaking about hope a lot, but we should speak about hope and action, not just hope. So we have a big responsibility. My impression about all this is I see a lot of, and I hear a lot of brains, a lot of progress, and that's really inspiring. But at the end of the day, I still don't know what needs to be done. And I wonder, I have the impression of a program which would be called spinal cord injury cure or functional progress, and which is slightly, I would say, mismanaged, or at least which is not optimally managed. I see projects, silos approach. I still fear that there is a kind of a lack of collaboration and a lack of alignment. I hear now and again, no, it's not a funding issue. That's very confusing to me. Like Jeff said, I don't understand. We hear that the funding is going down, that it's not enough. I'd like to ask Jerry or so again, because you said, I'm fine. I'm happy that you are fine, but we are not fine. I welcome what you have shown. I'm not here to criticize, but I'm wondering, because you said switching to clinical trial is another story. These were your words. So I just wonder, does it mean that you are not the one, the organization and the system is done in that way, that you are not the one who is going to actually trigger the clinical trials? And who is going to do that? And so this could be, to me, a project and a task force. What you presented seems to be gorgeous. I mean, okay, it's not working, but for the people who cannot breathe on their own, I think it's fantastic. So I believe you. You seem to believe in what you do. It seems to work on rats. I don't know if it's necessary to go to pigs or whatever. But then why don't we, even out of that meeting, why don't we take your project, for example, out of others? Like an example, take a target of, well, we want clinical trials to happen within 2 years. I don't know if it's, and let us go backwards and see what needs to be done. From the governments, the NIH, from the community, from other scientists. Let's take a goal, let's take the challenge, let's manage. So this kind of project, I think that's one point, one side. Another side would be to manage the program as a whole, because I think that there will be much more need for collaboration and for an integral approach, which is still not there, I'm afraid. And I wonder in how far this kind of meeting could trigger that integral approach, and how the community could take the responsibility of really bringing people together and go one step further, because we are now sharing information, which is fantastic, really. The organization of this Working2Walk, wow, I'm really amazed. It's fantastic, so thank you. But how can we go one step further? So both on projects and on program. Maybe you want to reply first.
Okay. I think what you've already done to bring scientists and companies together in one meeting is a huge step. You may not realize it, but the fact that Tony and I are sitting together, and he saw what I do, and I saw what he is doing, I think has done an incredible service towards answering the questions that you raised. Now, Tony realizes there's no work, and that will stimulate, I hope, a message back to Ron Cohen and Accorda that we should switch the effort at Accorda to spinal cord injury again. And they own the methods, they make the product, they have a dedicated group of scientists, a wonderful group of people, I think, and Accorda is making significant profits. There's a lot of money in Accorda, we were told, now. Not enough, perhaps, but enough to get started, I believe, with a clinical trial. What we need is the magic spark. We need a kind of a wise young for chondroitinase. I mean, Wise spends huge time, an enormous amount of time, traveling, organizing, push, and organize a network to his credit of people who said, yeah, let's do this, right? I would argue that the science behind chondroitinase is well beyond the science that is going towards clinical trials for umbilical cord blood cells and lithium. But nonetheless, he's got a trial going. And we don't. We need a critical spark, a critical magician who puts us together, a personality or a group of people that just say, let's start.
Well, I think that, thanks for that. I think that, what you said about this particular event bringing together people is very, very true. And I know a few other interactions that have happened here in the halls, I suppose, maybe even in bars, that have put together scientists and other people from business who want to actually move their particular technologies forward. And to be honest, I was flabbergasted to discover that this doesn't happen all the time. That it's not standard procedure that the scientists, the business people, the researchers, and the patients themselves don't come together all the time and do this. So, another, again, a huge thank you to the organisers of this event, Donna, Marilyn, Susan. I think that this is a catalyst for the future, and I think that every time I come to this, like I said, I see more and more positive progress in this field. And we've gone in 3 years from nothing in people to a number of competing technologies and competing companies with cells or interventions in people. And I think that is really kind of a big deal. But also, like you said, these things do need a champion. And maybe there's many champions in this room today that will see some of these therapies and take them on their shoulders to move them forward. Who knows, right?
There's several things that I've heard that really are great to focus on. The first was cohesiveness in our community. It does seem like we have a lot of different people doing a lot of different things that aren't as coordinated as they could be. And I also don't want to forget to add to what other people have said about being very thankful to the organizers of this event, especially for emphasizing the advocacy that we're doing right now, that we're talking about doing right now. And the other thing was creativity in terms of talking about the financing and the design of trials and the organizational practices. I think that we have to organize among us, specifically those of you who are international and those of us from the United States, to form a community that allows us to talk about talk about how we get this stuff that's going on in the lab translated for us so that we know what we, in a coordinated way, decide are the right things to try and support. Whether or not it's conjointness or whatever, but there's competition between different folks in academia that I think cuts off the kind of sharing and coordination that can happen. I'm sure we all know that there's competition in the corporate world, and so those are things that we have to figure out creatively how to overcome, because there are so many different people doing things that don't seem to build on each other in a way. And when the gentleman on Skype mentioned, what are we going to do? I propose right now, making a group of those of us who are in chairs who want to advocate effectively to honor the folks here at Working2Walk and form a group that does this kind of, coordinated, creative, cohesive advocacy. And you guys being up there is awesome. I'm so glad and inspired to see other folks, intelligent, really effective folks, pursuing this. And I think we've got to build on it and not just each go back to our own, part of the country or world and wonder why we didn't, take the bull by the horn. So I hope that after this we can make a little group and form some sort of potentially powerful advocacy group.
Hear, hear.
I would pose that, in fact, it really is all about money. It's about money when it comes to the number of investigators, the number of salaries you can pay for work. It's enough money for companies to get involved. It's all about money when it comes to the healthcare payers. I can tell you we have over 400 patients in the Neuro Recovery Network who've been given therapist-assisted body-weight support treadmill training, and we can show efficacy, and yet at Shepherd Center we can't enroll anybody on Medicare and Medicaid simply because it will make it financially untenable for Shepherd to stay afloat if we do that. So there's money all over the place that is problematic. One thing that keeps coming up is this difficulty of translation. I think perhaps one thing that could be focused on by advocates is getting things from the bench to the bedside trials, and I think that this first-in-human research is an area that's been under-focused on, and I think that if you wait for a company to do a randomized clinical trial, there'll be a long time between the bench and the bedside. Another big hurdle is not just the FDA, but there's some ethics involved here as well. And I would pose something for people to think about. And I hate the fact that this is the only best example I can think of, but in the case of assisted suicide, it has been decided that individuals have enough autonomy that if they are evaluated by the physician and not found to be depressed and found to be of sound mind, they will then elect to take control of their life and do something with it, that they can't do that. And I would argue that in the case of spinal cord injury, if there were individuals who want to participate in research studies for which we have not yet established safety or efficacy, that wanted to participate and went in full well knowing what they were risking in terms of possible decline in function or side effects or other sorts of things, it might be possible to do that in an ethical manner. There would have to be some sort of method to be sure people knew what they were talking about and weren't doing it out of desperation and depression. But it might be a role that the community might be able to take to convince folks that some of this first-in-human work could go forward. Almost like with experimental therapies for cancers. Nobody in a chair is going to die next week because they didn't get the therapy, which is what sells it in cancer biology. But it might be an avenue some folks might want to take. I want to proceed very cautiously and very ethically, but I think it's worth discussion.
Well, that's great. I think tomorrow we're going to be speaking with some powerful people in the government in this country, so hopefully we'll get that message across to them. And also a data point relative to that is exactly that. Like, we're traveling in our droves all over the world and getting therapies and interventions done that we don't even know what they are for sure. We're also paying hundreds of thousands per person and traveling all over the world to get these things done to us that does not add to the overall body of science. No one reports on them. There's no outcome measures before or after these interventions. And, you know, as someone who's involved with the Irish Stem Cell Foundation, people contact me all the time and they're asking, you know, where can I get the good stem cells, dude? And like, well, no, it's not quite that simple. And sadly, I have to tell them just how difficult it is to get these things fully trialed and funded and everything like that. So, yeah, you know, the question is already answered by us. We are taking our own lives in our own hands and putting them into people's who are charlatans, in my estimation, in many cases, and paying through the nose for the privilege.
Visit u2fp.org for more coverage from Working to Walk and the latest in spinal cord injury news.